What if Northwood added SCP-066 into SCP Secret Laboratory? That's the question I'm asking today. For today's video, I thought it'd be fun to once again speculate on another potential SCP we could see added in SL. And for today's episode, I thought it'd be fun if we talked about SCP-066. So without further ado, let's just get right into the video. To start off, what is SCP-066? SCP-066, also known as Eric's Toy, originally started as a safe class SCP object before transitioning into a Euclid class SCP. Originally, 066 was a knot of colorful strings that would produce harmless items and effects such as music or musical notes. 066 would perform these musical notes whenever someone would interact with its strings, and each string would kind of perform a musical note essentially, so you could play with it like as an instrument. Eventually, researchers found that 066 could also shapeshift into other beings, such as in one incident where it shapeshifted into a small cat. However, although 066 may seem as a very passive, non-aggressive SCP, it is all changed by an incident known as SCP-066-2. Essentially what happened in this incident was the researchers wanted to further test 066 by cutting off a piece of it off with scissors. However, when a D-class went in to perform the task, 066 would move out of the way, and eventually asking the D-class for the first time speaking in a voice if he was Eric. When the D-class responded with "No, I am not," 066 changes form into an all-blood red knot of yarn, eventually covering itself full of dozens of eyes. After this incident is when it became very aggressive towards all Foundation personnel. 066 would begin to play music on its own without the interaction of anyone nearby it, as well as having strands of yarn move out like tentacles to attack other people potentially. 066 would attack anyone who got near it by either producing harmful items to attack with or by producing loud music or noises that would be very lethal to people. 066 also would constantly be asking the name Eric wherever it went over and over again in a very deep and distorted voice. And because of this, not only was it transferred from safe to Euclid, but it had to be recontained into a new facility, or a new containment chamber more like, where it's now kept in a tungsten carbide box inside its site's high value item storage facility. Now after that brief summary of 066, the question we should be asking is 066 unique enough for SCPSL? I personally think yes, absolutely. His potential kit not only would be the most complex we have seen to date in-game, he'd also be a very small SCP/playable class to play as. Of course, I would say that he would have been the first, but with the introduction of the flamingos from the last 2023's Christmas update, they kind of stole that gold medal, so I guess he'd be the second. But you know, still a unique playable SCP that's like small in stature is still nothing to just ignore. Something still unique to the game. Now, taking all that into account, how would SCP-066 be implemented in-game? I think it'd be interesting if 066 was a hybrid between its safe and Euclid counterparts from the lore from its original article. Kind of also, this is like my idea is to mimic the lore of SL, where Site 2, which is the official site name of the SL map, is the foundation site for SCP objects that have mutated and changed and otherwise evolved. That's kind of like the in-lore explanations as to the overhaul updates or rework updates for SCPs such as 173, 096, 939, and as such. So it's kind of like to keep in the spirit of the the quote-unquote lore of the game that 066 can change. He's kind of like he changes throughout the game from his safe counterpart to his Euclid counterpart. I think that'd be kind of interesting, as not only is it very unique gameplay wise, but like I said, just a little nod to the lore of the game, which I think is just kind of cute, So to start off, SCP-066 should spawn in its brand new, quote unquote, like brand new room in heavy containment zone that should be designated as the Site 02's high value item storage. Kind of like to mimic the lore of where it's kept in now in its article from the wiki. I think this should obviously have to be a brand new room that they have to Northwood will have to implement in game, but it's nothing too crazy. I think it would just be like a very simple room where it just houses a lot of lockers, because it's obviously a storage room, so it should have like a lot of lockers, maybe a lot of like storage like containers, like storage vaults and stuff like that, like wooden crates and stuff like that. maybe some shelves, and there could be some items on the shelves too, as well as maybe 1 or 2 like SCP pedestals, like the SCP item lockers. I don't know if this room would be like gated, where maybe you can only get it within a certain card access, but still, you know, I think it's an interesting idea that 066 could also add this pretty interesting and unique room in heavy containment. Obviously, of course, when the round starts, 066 will spawn in its containment chamber, which will be open at the beginning of the game so he can leave and, you know, start roaming around. So he's just not locked in his box, obviously. 066 should start in its colorful and passive form from its, you know, when it was still classified as a safe object. And in order to reach its Euclid form, where it's actually aggressive and attacks players, it should have to fill out a new meter, which I'm gonna call resentment, quote unquote. In order to fill out the resentment meter, to max it out to be able to become aggressive towards humans, 066 has to find human classes and interact with them. If 066 is near a human, it can start to use its abilities in order to max out resentment. Once 066 maxes its resentment meter, it can then transfer into its hostile state where it can finally attack people. So what abilities would 066 have when it's still classified as safe? Well, it wouldn't really actually have any abilities other than one simple passive ability, that being that 066's passive ability makes it so any human class that damages 066 themselves, or any nearby SCPs, or uses an SCP item near 066, including 914, will trigger resentment, causing the meter to fill up. So essentially, the idea is it doesn't like it being attacked, it being harmed, to kind of mimic the incident 066-2. It doesn't like it when other SCPs are harmed, and obviously it wouldn't like it if an SCP item is used, especially as well as 914. And I think that would also help with 914 camping in game, because if, let's just suppose, if 066 is outside 914's gate, it could hear that 914 is being used. If it hears it's being used and is camping outside the gate, it will be able to, you know, max out resentment very easily. I think that's a pretty simple, you know, way to kind of maybe stop 914 camping, especially if maybe there's not a computer, like if there's no 079, there's no 106 to kind of stop that from happening. It's just another SCP that can kind of stop camping in a way, which I think is, you know, probably a good idea, since, you know, camping is a big problem in SL, so, you know, the less we have of it, probably the better. Once 066 reaches its Euclid form, it'll have a brand new list of abilities. This includes an ability to attack nearby players with its tendrils. This will be its primary mode of attack. The way I'm thinking about it is I'm thinking that these will be very quick attacks, so there's like very little cooldown to attack and attack over and over again, except this would probably do very little damage. Maybe, let's say my idea is maybe 5 damage per hit, so it's not doing too much damage, but it's still doing enough damage to, you know, kind of be a threat, a serious threat if not taken seriously. As for passive abilities, 066 would have a new passive ability once it's in its Euclid form. That's just basically it saying Eric constantly in a deep and distorted voice over and over again. There's not really any way to stop it, and it's kind of just to mimic how when 066 transformed into its like blood red form, it kind of just now always is blurting out the word Eric and asking that question over and over again, just Eric, Eric, Eric. It's kind of just a way to kind of make it so humans can kind of hear 066 coming, because obviously 066 is just a ball of yarn, so he probably wouldn't make any noise at all, or very little noise while moving. So it's just kind of a way for, you know, humans to actually be able to hear him through like the walls and around the corner, like, or near the hallways and stuff like that, just so they don't get jump scared by him, just get insta-killed, essentially. Speaking of insta-killing, we have his main ability, or his big ability, I suppose, which will be the ability to play loud music, pretty much deafening humans for a limited time if they're either far enough away or get away from him in time. Otherwise, they'll just get killed after, you know, a certain amount of time exposed to the loud music. I think this ability should have a medium-sized cooldown, because even though it's this like big attack ability, it's kind of OP, so it shouldn't be spammed a lot. This is also, of course, to mimic 066's like main gimmick, which is blaring loud music that could either deafen or kill a man. So, you know, there's that inspiration there. Another gimmick that 066 has is the potential to interact with other human classes. The way I'm thinking of it is he has different interactions based off of his state. So for example, when 066 is in its safe form and a human interacts with 066, one of 3 outcomes can happen. either 066 will spawn a random non-lethal and non-SCP item, 066 will morph into a random passive animal in its yarn form, kind of to mimic the cat that it morphed into in one incident by the researchers in the wiki article. So I'm thinking probably just like, you know, friendly pet type animals like dogs, cats, bunnies, guinea pigs, I don't know. Just animals that people perceive as like, you know, cute, adorable, friendly, things like that. Wouldn't really do anything other than just changing its form for a limited time. And then the third outcome can be 066 being able to play a small collection of musical notes, kind of to mimic how when people originally, when it was still in its colorful form, the researchers would play with him and it would produce a little bit of music. These interactions can only be done once before having to wait for a small cooldown. These interactions will also deplete the portion of 066's resentment meter, kind of to like have it so the human classes kind of have to balance out and it kind of micromanage him a bit. If they're near him, if they see him in a safe form, they're like, oh my god, we can't attack each other, we can't attack him, we gotta play it safe, no SCP items. We have to calm him down and make sure he doesn't become, you know, too strong before he kills us all. Kind of like a way to, like, you know, kind of like he's a ticking time bomb and like the humans have to make sure he doesn't explode too soon. I think it's an interesting gameplay gimmick that we don't really have anything of at the moment. I guess the closest thing we would have to a ticking time bomb would be 096, but that's just more of gameplay equals looking down, which is boring and lame and no one likes that. So it's an interesting way to like spin that kind of sort of gimmick into SL. Once 066 reaches its Euclid form and a human interacts with it, one of three things can happen. Either 066 will spawn any random item from in-game, however the human player will take damage doing so. 066 morphs into a hostile animal for a limited time, so kind of to mimic how before it would maybe like morph into a cat, now it could morph into like a snake or something. And then now its default attack could do maybe double or triple the damage, kind of like to make it a little stronger for a limited time. So maybe instead of doing 5 damage, now his default attack does 10 or 15, kind of to give him an edge in gameplay. And then the third outcome could be 066 will automatically use its special ability where it plays loud, deafening music, even if its ability for it was on cooldown at the time. So there's kind of a risk and reward factor. It's like, oh, maybe I want to interact with 066 real quick, but I might get killed doing so, or I could get maybe an 05 or a micro or some soda. I don't know. It's a risk and reward factor, you know. You might get something good, you might just die, but I think it's an interesting gimmick. I think maybe these interactions, once it's in its Euclid form, doesn't have a cooldown, just so players can kind of keep trying to abuse it, although eventually they will get blasted by it, obviously. But, you know, I think it's fun. It's like a risk and reward system, potentially. And also one last thing for these human interactions is that these human interactions will have a shared cooldown among all players. So let's say there's multiple players in a room next to 066. If one person interacts with them when it's in its safe form, the cooldown persists for every player in the lobby. Obviously, once it's in its Euclid form, the cooldowns don't exist anymore, so it's free game for everyone. But when it's in its safe form, there's a shared cooldown among all the human players to try to interact with 066. Another note to make is once 066 reaches its Euclid form and becomes aggravated towards players, it should fully heal itself, kind of to stop people from immediately just seeing 066. Let's say the facility guards come in, there's a huge wave, there's a huge group at the beginning of the game, they immediately find 066 and immediately start blasting him. This is kind of to make sure that the player who's playing 066 just doesn't get blasted within the first 2 minutes of the game. So all that shooting that they're going to try to do to quote unquote kill him, it won't matter, because the moment he transforms into his aggravated state, he fully heals himself, and he not only fully heals himself, but obviously he'll give himself back his hume, so then they have to go through the hume again to then do damage to him. And it's just like, you know, why would you shoot at him at the beginning of the game? There's no point. He's not going to take any damage, and you're just going to get yourself killed and everyone killed. So that's kind of to stop, you know, people from just immediately killing the player who's playing as 066 at the beginning of the game. Because obviously you don't want to die in the first 2 minutes of the game as an SCP. That's just lame. That's just stupid. Another note to make is while 066 is in its transformation phase, it would shriek out really loudly an assortment of just like random musical notes or maybe musical instruments, which will temporarily deafen any nearby humans, but it'll just be the effect, like the deafening effect. It won't be lethal in terms of damage. It's just purely audio effects where it just deafens you for a few seconds. Another note to make is once SCP-006 reaches its Euclid form, it can no longer transform back into its safe form for the rest of the game. So once it finally reaches, a full maxed out resentment bar and transforms into its blood red eyeball anger fueled state, he's good to go for the rest of the game. He doesn't have to worry about transforming back into his docile, friendly state. Also, I think it'd be cool if when 066 is in its friendly, safe state, that his vision should be super saturated, kind of like to mimic how colorful he is and how friendly he is. But once he reaches its Euclid state, his vision is super dark and super red tinted, kind of like to mimic how he's like blood red now and he's like full of anger, trying to kill anyone who's near him. I think that's a fun way also to mimic or to call back to his lore in the SCP Wiki. Some final quick notes, for 066 for gameplay is obviously he should have a lower health pool compared to other SCPs just because of how small he is. He's kind of a hard target, I think, and he can dodge easily and stuff like that, so I think he should maybe have a small health pool, not like super small, but definitely like on the lower side of the SCP health pool spectrum. And then as one final note, I think he should also be kind of a slow walking, or I guess slow moving SCP, similar maybe to 049's walking speed, because obviously, like I said again, he's kind of OP with his special ability that can blast music and potentially just insta kill people. So obviously you want to have the chance to outrun him, so you got to make him kind of slow to balance that out. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty much about it for my speculation. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave a comment down below of what you guys think of any maybe more ideas you guys have about 066 or other future SCPs you'd like to see in game. I have a lot of SCP ideas of for this type of video series of SCPs I'd like to see in the future, and I've read the comments, so if you guys have any ideas, I'll read the comments. It's pretty interesting your guys' ideas, and maybe I'll convert one into a video. It's just fun for just community stuff, just us vibing. So other than that, thank you all for watching. Appreciate all the support as always, and yeah, that's about it. See ya.